words of our Divine Mother from the book The Mother by our Lord Sri Aurobindo with Mother's comments of 1951. Comments on chapter 6, page 104. Question. Imperial Maheshwari is seated in the wideness above the thinking mind and will. Is there a plane of will as there is a mental plane, a vital plane, etc.? For this, our Divine Mother says, I have explained that to you in connection with Sachidananda. Sachidananda exists at the very origin of the worlds, but there is a Sachidananda behind all the other states of being. You could make a diagram, though that does not explain much. It is quite an erroneous idea, but it makes things more easily understandable. You arrange the states of being according to a scale. Then, when you have the earth below and the supreme above, it is not at all like that. I hasten to tell you, but anyway, it is easy to understand. You put the earth at the bottom and the supreme at the top, and you divide that into lots of little parts, each of which represents a state of being that makes a kind of ladder. And then you have, as though behind it, behind your ladder, something which supports it, against which it leans. It is not a wall, but it is something which supports your ladder. And that is precisely the first principle of the universal form. In Hindu terminology, it is called Sachidananda. It is there. Everything leans upon that. Without that, nothing could exist. It is that which upholds and allows existence. Then, if you enter into a state of consciousness and find yourself, for instance, in the higher mind, for generally it is more easily that there this happens, you have started from the physical and climbed slowly, rung by rung, as far as the higher mind. But instead of continuing your ascent on the ladder, you enter into a kind of interiorization and try to go out of the form. You pass into a kind of silence outside the form. You pass in between the bars of your ladder and enter straight into Sachidananda, which supports everything from behind. And then you can have mentally the experience of Sachidananda. I have known people who had it and thought they have reached the heights of the Supreme, for there is a similarity in the experience, a very great likeness, only it is limited to the mind. The mind alone participates in it. Well, for the will, it is the same thing. Instead of being the support of the ladder, it is a kind of force, a very powerful current which passes through all these states. Starting from the above, it is the supreme will, and coming down into the physical manifestation. Hence, if you get into affinity with this vibration or this force, you can enter the state of will. That is, whatever state of being you may find yourself in, physical, vital, mental, etc., if you enter into a state of consciousness and force, you come in contact with this power of will. It penetrates into you and you can use it for any purpose. if your reception is free from all egoism, if you are pure, completely surrendered, and accept only what comes from the divine, and if you don't mix anything with it, egoism or desires or limitations, well, it is a state a bit difficult to attain, but if you attain it, you will receive this force of will. It in its original state, pure, for it comes down pure. It is only in its reception that it gets deformed. Then, instead of being your will, it becomes an expression of the divine will. And this happens without your leaving the physical body. You can receive the force of the divine will without leaving the physical. Only you see, you must not change it and deform it and spoil it in the receiving. When you feel within you a kind of indomitable energy to realize something, when you tell yourself, I shall do this, whatever the cost, I shall go to the end and shall use my will for you, always say my will. Well, you cannot be in that state unless you have come into contact with this current of will force. Only with your little personal reaction, naturally you deform it and use it all wrongly, and then you come into contact or into conflict with other elements. But if you are truly a yogi, you receive the current and nothing can stop the elan of your action, even physically. There are other things like that, other states, other forces, there are many of these. Fundamentally, if one studies very attentively, one perceives that there is nothing in the individual being which is not the expression of the deformation or the diminution, reduction, lessening of something which has its origin in the Supreme and is of a universal nature. So you see, all these ideas of pulling, calling are not quite right. Essentially, the only thing one should do is to prepare oneself, make oneself worthy of this contact, and when one has had it, not deform it, and this excludes nobody. Even a very small child can, at certain moments in his life, come into touch with one of these great universal forces of divine origin and use it for its childish needs. Unfortunately, there are added to it so many limitations, so much of egoism, ignorance, stupidity, that it is often completely disfigured. It cannot be recognized, it is unrecognizable, but the origin of the force is the same. And that is why, when one attains a certain state of consciousness, one perceives that if these forces were not there, one would be nothing, would not exist. And instead of saying with the usual self complacency, I do this, I do not do that, I have decided that I want that thing, I shall succeed, all this goes away from you in such a way that you can never again think like that. It seems to you so ridiculous, so ridiculous. As soon as the little I comes in, that means a deformation, a limitation, a degradation. In fact, all that you do not value comes with your I. You remove the I, and all that disappears at the same time. Date 11th May 1951.
Extremely few who have reached or have tried to reach even the nirvana. To reach even the nirvana, one has to give up ego and desire. Could it be said that even a few sadhaks in the ashram have succeeded in doing so? Surely everybody must be making some effort to do this. Why then they are not successful? Is it that after some effort they forget the aim and live here as in ordinary life.